The miscalculation. The grand chamber hung suspended in the void between stars, a crystalline sphere that reflected the light of distant galaxies. Inside, representatives from 23 worlds sat in a perfect circle, each in their designated position. This was the Vashtari Coalition, the most powerful alliance in the known galaxy. For 3,000 years, they had maintained peace, prosperity, and order across hundreds of star systems. Today, they gathered to discuss a species they had been watching for decades. A species that had just achieved faster-than-light travel. A species called humanity. High Executor Kelmer stood at the center of the chamber. His species, the Draxians, had founded the Coalition centuries ago. His blue-gray skin shimmered under the ambient light, and his 4 eyes scanned the assembled delegates with practiced authority. He had called this emergency session, and everyone knew why. The humans had finally left their home system. They had established a small colony on a planet they called New Horizon, just 8 light years from Earth. It was a violation of established protocol. New spacefaring species were supposed to wait for contact. They were supposed to seek permission before expanding. The humans had done neither. Kelmer activated the central hologram. Earth appeared above them, rotating slowly. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful. But Kelmer knew better. He had studied this world. He had read their history. What he found disturbed him deeply. The hologram shifted, showing images of human cities, human technology, human warfare. Distinguished delegates, Kelmer began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. We face a unique situation. The species known as humans has achieved interstellar capability far faster than any species in recorded history. They went from basic flight to faster-than-light travel in less than 200 years. This alone should concern us. Several delegates nodded in agreement. The Korathi representative, a being of living crystal, chimed softly. This is unprecedented. Our own development took nearly 1,000 years. The Venlari required 1,500. How did they accomplish this? Kelmer gestured, and the hologram changed again. Now it showed human weapons. Missiles, guns, nuclear devices, orbital platforms. They accomplished it through constant warfare. In the past century alone, they have fought over 300 armed conflicts. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet multiple times over. They have killed billions of their own species in the pursuit of resources, territory, and ideological differences. The chamber filled with murmurs. Some delegates looked shocked. Others looked disgusted. Violence on such a scale was almost unthinkable to most coalition species. Wars still happened, of course, but they were rare, limited affairs. Most conflicts were resolved through negotiation, economic pressure, or carefully controlled military actions with minimal casualties. The idea of a species that had nearly destroyed itself repeatedly was horrifying. Military strategist Yavrin stepped forward. She was Kaltorian, tall and elegant, with silver skin that seemed to absorb light. Her species had served as the Coalition's military planners for generations. They were known for their analytical minds and strategic brilliance. I have completed a full assessment of human military capabilities, Yavrin announced. She brought up new data, charts and numbers floating in the air. Their technology is primitive by our standards. They still use projectile weapons that fire metal slugs using chemical reactions. Their ships have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no quantum drives. Their fastest vessels can barely reach 0.3 light speed. Their armor is basic alloy construction. Their detection systems are centuries behind ours. She paused, letting the information sink in. Based on standard combat analysis, a single Coalition warship could defeat their entire space fleet. A battle group of 40 ships would be overkill. I estimate complete victory within 6 hours of engagement, with minimal coalition casualties. The delegates began to discuss among themselves. The consensus was clear. Humanity was dangerous, but weak. They needed to be stopped before they became a real threat. But they could be stopped easily. It would be a simple operation. A show of force. A quick lesson in galactic order. Then a single voice cut through the murmur. I must respectfully disagree with this assessment. Every head turned. Observer Tylan stood slowly. He was Methric, a species known for their curiosity and scientific minds. They rarely participated in military discussions, preferring to study and document. Tylan had been assigned to observe Earth for the past 20 years. He had lived in orbit around their planet, watching, learning, analyzing. High Executor Kelmer regarded him with barely concealed annoyance. Observer Tylan, you are not a military specialist. Perhaps you should leave such matters to those with expertise. Tylan did not sit down. With respect, High Executor, I have spent 2 decades studying humanity. I have watched their entertainment media, studied their literature, analyzed their military history, and examined their problem-solving methods. I believe this military assessment is dangerously incomplete. Yavrin's silver skin seemed to darken slightly. Are you questioning my professional analysis? I am questioning whether we are measuring the right things, Tylan replied calmly. Yes, human technology is less advanced. Yes, their weapons are primitive. But we are ignoring something crucial. These beings have spent 10,000 years in almost constant conflict. Not with us. With each other. He activated his own data stream. The hologram shifted to show human history. Ancient armies with swords and shields. Medieval castles under siege. World wars with millions dead. Modern conflicts with drones and cyber warfare. Every generation they fight. Every war they learn. Every defeat they adapt. They have developed thousands of different combat doctrines. They have invented tactics for every terrain, every situation, every possible scenario. And they have done all of this while fighting opponents who think like them, who adapt like them, who are as desperate to win as they are. The chamber was quiet now. Some delegates looked thoughtful. Others looked dismissive. Kelmer's expression hardened. Observer Tylan, your concern is noted. However, adaptability cannot overcome technological inferiority. A warrior with a stone knife cannot defeat a soldier with a plasma rifle, no matter how clever he is. The vote was called. 22 species voted in favor of military action. Only the Methric delegation abstained. The decision was made. The Vashtari coalition would launch a containment strike against human space infrastructure. Earth's orbital stations would be disabled. New Horizon Colony would be evacuated. Humanity would be confined to their home planet until they learned to respect galactic law. Asterisk. Battle Commander Zexter received his orders with satisfaction. He was Vorlian, a species bred for warfare. His people had served as the Coalition's military arm for 800 years. They had never lost a battle. Never even come close. His record was perfect. 43 successful campaigns, 0 defeats. This would be his 44th. He assembled his fleet within hours. 40 warships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. They had shields that could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. They had weapons that could glass a planet. They had sensors that could detect a ship from 1,000,000 kilometers away. They had crews trained in every known combat situation. As his fleet prepared to jump to human space, Zexter reviewed the intelligence reports one final time. He saw the primitive human vessels. He saw their basic weapons. He saw their lack of defensive capability. This would not even qualify as a real battle. It would be target practice, a training exercise. His only concern was making sure he did not accidentally kill too many humans. The Coalition wanted them contained, not exterminated. He would need to be careful with his firing solutions. His communication officer approached. "Commander, we are ready to jump. All ships report combat ready. All systems optimal. Estimated arrival in human space in 6 minutes." Zexter stood, stretching his forearms. "Good. Once we arrive, broadcast the standard containment message. Give them 10 minutes to respond. If they surrender immediately, we will minimize damage. If they resist, we will disable their infrastructure as ordered. Either way, this will be over before our next meal cycle." The fleet jumped. 40 ships vanished in flashes of folded space. When they emerged, Earth's sun hung before them, a yellow dwarf star unremarkable in every way. Zexter's sensors immediately detected human vessels. 23 ships in orbit around Earth. 15 more around New Horizon. A few scattered patrol craft. Exactly as the intelligence reports predicted. Asterisk. "Broadcast the message," Zexter ordered. His communication officer complied. The message went out in all human languages, translated by Coalition AI. It was formal, authoritative, and clear. Humanity was in violation of Coalition law. They must cease expansion immediately. They must surrender their orbital infrastructure. They must accept Coalition oversight. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force. Compliance would be rewarded with eventual Coalition membership. They had 10 minutes to respond. Zexter expected immediate surrender. Perhaps some desperate pleas for mercy. Maybe some last-minute negotiations. What he got instead changed everything. The human response came through after just 2 minutes. It was not what anyone expected. It was a single transmission, broadcasted on all frequencies, from Earth and New Horizon simultaneously. The message was simple, delivered in a calm, almost casual voice. "To the Vashtari Coalition. We received your ultimatum. We reject it. Earth is our home. New Horizon is our future. We did not ask for your permission because we do not recognize your authority. You want to contain us. You are welcome to try. But understand this. We have been fighting and dying for 10,000 years. We have survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near extinction. We have split the atom, touched the stars, and refused to quit when every rational mind said we should." The voice paused, then continued. "You think this will take you 6 hours? You are wrong. You have no idea what you have started. Come ahead. Show us what you have got. We will show you what happens when you threaten humanity's children." The transmission ended. There was no fear in that voice. No desperation. No plea for mercy. Just calm, absolute defiance. Zexter stared at his display. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. This was not normal. This was not how targeted species behaved. For the first time in his long military career, Battle Commander Zexter felt something he had not felt in decades. Doubt. He shook it off. Words meant nothing. Defiance meant nothing. Military capability was all that mattered. And he had it in overwhelming measure. "All ships," Zexter commanded. "Advance to engagement range. Activate shields. Prepare weapons. We will disable their orbital infrastructure as planned. If they resist, destroy any ship that fires on us. Rules of engagement are clear. Minimize casualties, but protect Coalition forces at all costs." The 40 warships began to move, forming a standard attack formation. It was a formation that had won hundreds of battles. A formation that had never failed. Behind them, unnoticed in the sensor clutter of Earth's solar system, something was happening. Human ships were moving too, but not in retreat, not in surrender. They were spreading out, taking positions that made no tactical sense by coalition standards. They were preparing something the Vashtori coalition had never encountered before, something Observer Thailand had tried to warn them about. Humanity did not fight by the rules. They fought to win. The unthinkable victory battle commander Zexter watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships were not behaving like any enemy he had ever faced. They were not forming defensive lines. They were not protecting their orbital stations. They were not even grouping together for mutual support. Instead, they scattered like seeds thrown to the wind, each vessel moving in a different direction, some accelerating toward his fleet, others drifting seemingly at random through the debris field of their own construction satellites. Tactical analysis, Zexter demanded. His sensor officer studied the data streaming across multiple screens. Commander, I cannot determine their strategy. 16 vessels are approaching us directly, but at staggered intervals. 7 are moving away from Earth toward empty space. 4 appear to be positioning near that asteroid field. The remaining ships are holding position near their orbital stations, but have activated some kind of thruster system I have not seen before. None of this makes sense. It is not a recognized formation. It is chaos. Zexter nodded slowly. Chaos or desperation. Either way, it changes nothing. All ships maintain formation. Target the approaching vessels first. Disable their engines with precision fire. We will show them the futility of resistance. His weapons officer locked targeting solutions on the nearest human ship. It was a crude vessel, barely larger than a coalition shuttle, with visible hull plating and external fuel tanks that any proper engineer would have internalized. The plasma cannons charged, ready to fire. Then everything went wrong at once. The human ships that had been drifting suddenly came alive. Massive thruster burns erupted from every surface, not from engines, but from what Zexter now realized were explosive charges welded directly to their hulls. The ships did not accelerate smoothly. They jerked violently in random directions, moving in ways that no inertial dampening system should allow. His targeting computers lost their luck. Before they could reacquire, the humans fired. But these were not the primitive kinetic weapons his intelligence reports had described. These were rail guns, magnetic accelerators that launched dense metal penetrators at velocities that made Zexter's eyes widen in disbelief. The projectiles crossed the distance between fleets in seconds. Shields, holding at 92%, his defensive officer reported. But Commander, those impact velocities are beyond safety parameters. Any species using weapons that generate such forces would kill their own crews from the acceleration stress. How are they surviving those firing solutions? They are not supposed to be able to, Zexter muttered. His ships began returning fire. Plasma beams lanced through space, brilliant streams of superheated matter that could cut through ship armor like a blade through fabric. But the human vessels were no longer where his weapons were aimed. They had already moved, using those brutal explosive thrusters to dodge in directions that violated every principle of efficient ship design. More projectiles hammered into his shields. Then missiles began to arrive. Hundreds of them launched from the human ships that had moved into the asteroid field. These were not guided missiles in the traditional sense. They were mining charges, industrial explosives designed to crack open asteroids, now repurposed as weapons. They came in waves, overwhelming his point defense systems through sheer numbers. When they struck, they did not penetrate shields. They simply detonated, creating massive electromagnetic pulses that made his instruments scream with interference. Zexter realized too late what the humans were doing. They were blinding him. Forward shields failing. Sections 12 through 18, his defensive officer shouted over the sudden chaos. Multiple impacts. They are targeting the same points repeatedly, collapsing shield segments through sustained fire. That is not possible. Their targeting computers are not sophisticated enough for that level of precision. They are not using computers, his sensor officer said, voice filled with disbelief. I am detecting organic life signs actively controlling those weapons. They are aiming manually, compensating for our shield fluctuations in real time. What kind of species does that? A species that has been fighting each other for 10,000 years? Zexter thought, remembering Observer Teelan's warning too late. A species that learned to hit moving targets with primitive weapons long before they reached space. 3 of his ships suddenly went dark. Shields collapsed, hulls breached. Not destroyed, but crippled. The human vessels that had been approaching directly had not been attacking at all. They had been suicide runs. Unmanned drones filled with nuclear material crashed directly into his formation at maximum velocity. The explosions were massive, primitive, wasteful, and devastatingly effective. All ships, rake formation, Zexter ordered. Scatter pattern Delta. We need separation. Maintain shield integrity. Focus fire on any approaching vessels. His 40 ships began to spread out, moving into a defensive sphere. It was a standard countermaneuver, one that had worked against every enemy he had faced. But the humans were not every enemy. The moment his fleet dispersed, the human ships that had been moving away from Earth suddenly reversed course. They had not been retreating. They had been positioning themselves behind his fleet. Now they came screaming back, engines burning at outputs that should have melted their reactors. These ships carried different weapons. Zexter saw them on his sensors just before they fired. They were kinetic bombardment systems, essentially giant guns that used magnetic fields to accelerate massive chunks of refined metal. The kind of weapons usually reserved for planetary siege warfare, far too large and slow to use in ship-to-ship combat. Except the humans were not aiming at his ships. They were aiming at where his ships would be. They had calculated his defensive maneuver before he made it. The metal slugs, each one weighing several tons, arrived exactly as his vessels moved into their paths. Asterisk. Six more ships took catastrophic damage. Shields overloaded. Hulls crumpled. Crews died. Zexter's perfect formation was falling apart. His perfect record was dying. And the humans had been fighting for less than 15 minutes. Impossible, he whispered. Then louder, all ships, emergency jump preparation. We need to withdraw and reassess. Commander, the human ships near the orbital stations just launched something, his sensor officer reported. Thousands of objects. Small, fast, coming in on unpredictable trajectories. They appear to be construction debris, waste material, even frozen water. Ignore it, Zexter snapped. Focus on the armed vessels. But his sensor officer was right to worry. The humans had weaponized everything. Those thousands of objects were traveling at orbital velocities, turned into shotgun blasts of debris that shredded external sensors, damaged shield emitters, and created chaos across his tactical displays. It was not sophisticated. It was not elegant. It was absolutely brutal in its effectiveness. Through the sensor static, Zexter saw something that made his blood freeze. The human ships were regrouping. Not retreating, regrouping. They had taken losses. At least 8 of their vessels were destroyed or disabled. But the survivors were forming up, and they were not done fighting. A transmission came through, the same calm voice from before. Vashtari Coalition forces, you have 20 seconds to begin retreat procedures. After that, we stop being nice. Stop being nice? Zexter could not believe what he was hearing. His fleet was being torn apart, and the humans thought they had been holding back? His communication officer looked at him. Commander, what are your orders? Zexter made his decision. All ships, prepare for emergency quantum jump. Coordinates any coalition space, maximum range. Execute in 10 seconds. We will regroup and return with proper force. But the humans had anticipated this too. The vessels that had been holding position near Earth suddenly moved. They had been guarding something, and now Zexter saw what? A massive railgun built into one of their orbital platforms, far larger than anything a ship could carry. It had been there all along, hidden in sensor clutter, disguised as a construction project. The humans had been building it for months, waiting for exactly this moment. It fired. The projectile was not designed to destroy a ship. It was designed to create a localized space-time distortion. When it detonated in the center of his fleet, it released an electromagnetic pulse so massive that every quantum drive simultaneously shut down. Jump systems failed. Backup power failed. For a critical moment, his entire fleet was dead in space. In that moment, the humans struck with everything they had left. Every remaining ship, every remaining weapon, every last desperate tactic they could devise. More nuclear-tipped missiles, more kinetic penetrators, more weaponized debris, and something new, something that made Zexter realize just how badly the Coalition had miscalculated. Human boarding craft, small, fast, heavily armored shuttles that crashed directly into his disabled ships. They did not try to dock properly. They used shaped charges to blast through hull plating, then poured armed soldiers inside. The humans were boarding Coalition warships, with kinetic weapons and explosive charges, fighting room to room inside vessels they had crippled. Battle Commander Zexter watched his fleet die. Not in 6 hours, not even in 1 hour, in 34 minutes. From first shot to final casualty, the entire engagement lasted 34 minutes. Of his 40 warships, 14 were completely destroyed. 21 were too damaged to fight. The remaining 5, including his flagship, had suffered critical system failures. His crew casualties were in the thousands. His perfect record was shattered. And the humans were still coming. "Commander, emergency message from Coalition Command," his communication officer gasped, working from backup systems. They monitored the engagement. "They are demanding a full report. What do I tell them?" Zexter asked quietly. "Tell them the truth," a new voice said. Observer Tylan appeared on the communication screen, calling from his research vessel in a distant orbit. "Tell them that you just learned what I tried to explain. The humans do not fight wars the way we do. We fight to win territory, resources, strategic advantages. We calculate acceptable losses. We follow rules of engagement. Humans fight for survival. Every time. They do not calculate losses. They accept them. They do not follow rules. They make them up as they go. They do not care about elegant tactics or proper doctrine. They care about winning, and they have been practicing for 10,000 years. Zexter looked at his tactical display. The human ships were forming up again, damaged but still operational, preparing for a second strike if he did not withdraw immediately. How did we miss this? How did our intelligence fail so completely? Teelan's expression was sad. We measured their technology and assumed it mattered most. We ignored their history. We did not ask the right question. The question was never could they fight. It was how would they fight? And the answer was simple. They would fight like humans. Like a species that has survived extinction events, ice ages, plagues, and countless wars. Like a species that refuses to quit. The emergency jump systems finally came back online. Zexter ordered immediate retreat. His battered fleet limped away from Earth's solar system, leaving debris and dead behind. The battle had lasted 34 minutes. The war that the Coalition had expected to win in hours was over before it truly began. And humanity had won. Back in the crystalline chamber of the Vastari Coalition, High Executor Kelmer stood before the assembled delegates once more. His blue-gray skin looked paler than before. His 4 eyes could not meet the angry gazes of the other species' representatives. The chamber was no longer calm and orderly. It was filled with demands for explanations, calls for justice, and feared observer Tylan addressed the assembly, his report simple and devastating. Distinguished delegates, we have witnessed something unprecedented. We judged humanity by our standards, our rules, our expectations. We assumed technological superiority guaranteed victory. We were wrong. Humanity does not fight by our rules because they never agreed to them. They fight with every weapon they have, every tactic they can imagine, every desperate strategy they can devise. They turn mining equipment into weapons. They weaponize construction debris. They crash unmanned ships into enemies at suicide velocities. They do these things not because they are primitive, but because they are survivors. The chamber fell silent. What do we do now? The Korathi representative asked quietly. Tylan looked at the hologram of Earth, still rotating peacefully. We do what we should have done from the beginning. We talk to them. We negotiate. We treat them as equals, not as subjects to be contained. Because if we try force again, we will need more than 40 ships. We will need hundreds, maybe thousands. And even then, I am not certain we would win. High Executor Kelver closed his eyes. The coalition had maintained peace for 3,000 years through strength, wisdom, and careful management. In 34 minutes, a species they had dismissed as primitive had shattered that illusion. Humanity had sent a message, not in words, but in actions. They would not be contained. They would not be controlled. They would not surrender their freedom to explore the stars. And if the galaxy tried to stop them, they would fight with everything they had. Rules be damned. The emergency session ended with no resolution. No new military action authorized. No clear path forward. For the first time in coalition history, they had encountered a species they could not defeat through conventional warfare. They had encountered humans, and the galaxy would never be the same. On Earth, in a military command center deep beneath the surface, human officers watched the coalition fleet retreat. Exhausted soldiers celebrated. Engineers assessed damage. Politicians prepared statements. And one old general, scarred from a dozen Earth conflicts, sat alone in a quiet room. An aide approached carefully. "Sir, they are calling it a victory. The greatest military achievement in human history." The general did not smile. It was not a victory. It was a warning. We just told the galaxy that we will fight. Now they know. And eventually, they will come back with more ships, better plans, and proper respect for what we can do. The aide looked confused. Then we did not win? The general finally looked up. We survived. For humans, that is the same thing. We always find a way. That is what makes us dangerous. That is what they just learned. And that is why, next time, they will think twice before threatening us. He stood, walking to a window that showed the stars above. Out there, the galaxy was vast, filled with civilizations older and more advanced than humanity. But now they all knew one thing. Earth's children would not go quietly into any night. They would fight, adapt, survive, and eventually thrive. The battle had lasted 34 minutes. The legend would last forever. Asterisk.